I'm pleased to welcome my next guest, Vice Admiral Jon Hill. He's the 11th Director of the Missile Defense Agency, where he oversees its mission of defending the United States and its allies from ballistic missile attacks in all phases of flight. Vice Admiral Hill, it's great to be with you today. This is a topic that fascinates me because there's so many dimensions. I remember, I'm one of the people that remembers the Cold War. I remember the Soviet Union. I remember kind of, the over-the-horizon, questions. But I don't know where we are today as we look at both threats and our own capabilities. Can you just give our audience a quick sketch of what you're overseeing and what we need to defend ourselves against?
Sure, Steve. Thanks. I also remember the Cold War very well. I kind of went into the Navy in the mid-'80s, and we spent all of our time there. If you look how the Missile Defense Agency has evolved over the years, since that time when there was a Strategic Defense Initiative and then a Ballistic Missile Defense Organization and now a Missile Defense Agency, from a ballistic missile perspective, particularly defense of the homeland, the threats are the rogue threats that we're focused on today, and that is North Korea and Iran. So if you look at the architecture that we have in place to defend the homeland, it is focused against those threats. Now, when you move out of that homeland defense mission and go into the regional mission where we are forward, protecting our friends and allies and our forward deployed forces, that's a little bit of a different game. Those regional threats come from a multiple set of adversaries, and so we have to be ready and prepared to handle those with a sensor architecture that works depending on the region that you're in, with the fire control and networking capability, and then the appropriate weapons to take on a range of threats, from cruise missiles to hypersonic missiles to some of the shorter range ballistic missiles that might be targeting our forces forward.
Now, Admiral Hill, I know that we are always advancing in technology, always trying to fill in the holes and deficits that we have there. I've been reading about this next generation interceptor, which I know is some years out. What are our needs as you look forward that we need to fill in gaps with potential adversaries from places like North Korea and Iran? It's interesting talking about them because these are not very rich states, but they are powerful potential adversaries.
Right. If you go back to the history and look at when ballistic missiles were first used, they were really a terror weapon when you think about it. There wasn't precision guidance on the front end of those missiles. They were basically lobbed. They used the force of gravity. They go up into space and they come down. It's like throwing a football. What we're facing now, though, is precision guidance, high speeds, once they're back into the atmosphere, maneuver capability. But more importantly, when we engage, we're engaging not just a unitary or a singular warhead. They come equipped with decoys or what we'll call countermeasures, jamming devices and other things to challenge not only the sensor network, but the seekers of the weapons that we use. So that's the world that we're in today, is an evolution of ballistic missiles that now leads to more maneuver, higher speeds, often dim propellant so that they can't be seen from some of our space assets. And so we're going to have to go to space, and we have a plan in which to do that, to fully leverage space capability. We have space capability today that we're using. We'll continue to build out land-based radars and continue to increase the radar capability that is on our ballistic missile and integrated air and missile defense ships today. So it's a much more formidable threat in the future, so we have to build against that. Now, specifically for the next generation interceptor, that's exactly what it's going after, is an evolved threat from the rogue nations that includes countermeasures, it includes decoys, it includes jammers and those sorts of things. We could find ourselves with nuclear payloads. And so looking at all of that, that's the requirement space for the next generation interceptor, which will eventually, backfill and build out our capacity for the ground-based mid-course defense system, or GMD.
Well, look, we're right after a NATO leaders summit. President Biden was over there. I went over to Europe as part of that for a security forum in GlobeSec in Eastern Europe. And so Russia was a big part of the discussion. China was too. And I remember, a couple years back, Vladimir Putin doing a promo video for some kind of hypersonic, next generation, scare us all kind of, missile. And so I don't know how much is hype and how much is real. But when it comes to that upper end threat, are we prepared for that? And do we have something like that in our toolkit?
Well, so there's a number of ways to deal with threats, right? We'll always say diplomacy first, so it becomes a policy question. Then it comes down to the offensive capabilities that we may or may not employ depending on what that situation is. But you want to have credible defenses for the forward deployed forces. And so when you look at the kind of threats that you just described, what I'll call a boost hypersonic, or, it could be a cruise missile, hypersonic missile, it could be air launched. You have to have the capability to go against those. Today, within the Navy's sea base, we have a terminal capability that is deployed now that we're continuing to improve and deploy out to the fleet. What we want to do, though, is to engage further back. So when I say layered defense, that would be a layered defense approach to hypersonic missiles, to engage in the glide phase, which is when they're along the atmosphere, and then deal with them again when they come down into the terminal phase.
Admiral, let me ask you, this is kind of a James Bond-like question, but we might as well have some fun. I think that the kind of threats we've been talking about, even with the North Korea, we're talking about state-based threats. A lot of our security establishment for the last nearly 2 decades has been focused on non-state actors, on terror actors. Is there a point in the future where you worry about, and you've got to begin planning and thinking about, some of the technologies we're talking about, some of the capacity, moving from state control to non-state control? We've talked about Russia and Ukraine and how hybrid warfare is one of the new dimensions of conflict. So is it a mistake just to look at state-based systems? Do we have our antenna up for other kinds of morphing in this area that we should be aware of?
Yeah, absolutely. We do. It's something that, if you ask me what keeps me up at night, it is those unpredictable threats that may not necessarily be addressed through a hard kill, weapons defense system. And so we have to make sure that we're cyber resilient. When I talk about the fire control and networking that we have deployed globally, that is a large system. And so it must be hardened. It must be protected. So we spend a lot of time and energy there to make sure that the data that comes down, from our sensors into an engaging platform, that's resilient and can fight through. Because it's a very dirty environment coming in the future. And so we do have to plan and deal with that.
And then just finally, Admiral, one of the other areas I've talked to previous secretaries of defense about is the growing terrain and ecosystem around the Arctic. A very important area, particularly with climate change sort of changing that area up there. We've had a lot of, missile defense capability protecting North America based up in that area. And you just talked about space. How important or unimportant are placements like, the Arctic and the Northern Hemisphere, up there? Or are we getting to a place where geography, we can solve it through space? We are not geographic dependent anymore.
Yeah, I think one of the great values of space when I speak to sensor architectures, what that really means. If you have a radar sitting on land and a threat flies through that to give us tracking information, but they figure out a way to not fly through it, right? Then how are you going to see them? Right. So it really comes from looking down from space onto Earth. And that's how we handle the global maneuver problem. Because if you don't have a sensor, tracking from launch all the way through demise, there's a period of uncertainty in that track. And what we don't want to do is launch a weapon that then opens a seeker and there's nothing there because the target has maneuvered. So space really is that answer, and it does close the gap from having a geographical sense of where the threats are coming from and where they may be traveling. Being able to look down from space and have a global view becomes critically important, and that's recognized, not just within the Missile Defense Agency, but within the services as the future area for investment, and we're moving smartly in that direction.
I'll sneak in one more. Do you have the resources you need, or do you need more?
Well, like everybody, that's a question that was asked, during budget rollout and in some of our recent hearings. There's never enough money to do everything you want to do. So at the end of the day, you do have to prioritize. And I believe within President Budget 22, our request there, really does show the priorities of where we think we need to go. Congress directs that we also publish an unfunded requirements list, which we have provided to Congress. And, just kind of to summarize what we have in that list is where we had to take risk. It's a reflection of that. So if I can't have money for everything, then I'll have to prioritize. And the way we handled it this time is we kind of backed away from some of the production numbers that we would have for some of the missiles that are used in the regional fight. So we'll continue to build out the capacity best as we can, but I want to make sure that we're putting the budget behind the space capability, the budget behind the next generation interceptor, and then getting to the hypersonic missile defense glide phase interceptor, because that really is a capability that's needed today, because that threat exists today.
Well, Vice Admiral Jon Hill, Director of the Missile Defense Agency, I really want to thank you for enlightening us on this. This is not an everyday topic we have, and it's great that you were willing to give us a bit of a deep dive on this subject. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me, and thank you for your support to missile defense.